Hello class, good evening. Welcome back to your English literature classes. I am Harshita Vyas and we'll be talking about one of my favorite novels in the history of English literature, and that's Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. My book is slightly old and not in the best condition, but it's a really very well-loved book. So I would be really interested in hearing your thoughts about Jane Austen, since there's a lot being said about Jane Austen in every century. But since this is a recorded lecture, we cannot do that. However, this book, being one of her most popular books, is also one of the most discussed books ever. And let's begin with a very short sort of an introduction to the novel. And the novel has a fairly simple plot. Okay, it's set in England, and there's a family called the Bennet family, and they hear the news of a very wealthy single neighbor coming to the Netherfield house, whose name is Mr. Bingley. So the first paragraph is something that I really want you to memorize because it gives the hint of what the novel is supposed to deal with ahead in the plot as well. So the first line begins like this: It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Now that's a statement right there. That's a very strong statement, that a single man in possession of a good fortune. So we're not talking about poor men. We're not talking about men who are from the middle class. We're talking about rich men. Okay, a good fortune. So we are immediately introduced to the idea of class and status in the novel. And the second major theme that's linked with the idea of class and status is the want of a wife part of the sentence, which is essentially an introduction to how gender and class are examined in this novel. And in the country, of course, since the society was so heavily bent on assigning women their rank in the society through patriarchal means only. So Austen again expands on this in the next lines. However little known the feelings or views of such a man may be, on his first entering a neighborhood, this truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that he is considered as the rightful property of some one or other of their daughters. And this statement opens a lot of questions immediately, because the word she uses here is property, rightful property for a man. So we understand that gender is a very complex theme in this novel by Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice. And of course, it's about love, it's about marriage. We all know what the idea is in the novel. Mr. Bingley comes, he falls in love with one of the daughters. He becomes the rightful property of one of the daughters. However, the relationship isn't very smooth. He falls under the influence of he comes under the influence of his very good friend Mr. Darcy and his sisters. He maintains a distance from the love of his life, and we'll come to that later as well. But this universal truth, which is immediately satirized by Austen in the very next statement, is also followed. Okay, it's followed up and it is validated, which is essentially Austen telling us that there is a grain of truth in it. Okay, and we go back to the history of England, of course, to understand the statement, because this novel is about pride, it's about prejudice, it's about marriage and love, but also it's about women's right, women's issues, and women's claim on property, right? So we know that the major couple in the novel, the major relationship in the novel is actually about Elizabeth and Darcy, but the way it begins, it's through Elizabeth's sister, Jane, and Darcy's best friend, Mr. Bingley, and their seemingly appropriate and extremely correct relationship, about which Helena Kelly says in her book The Secret Radical, a book on Jane Austen, and the subtle uh, text, the textuality of the novel, that when she compares Darcy and Elizabeth and their relationship,